Welcome back, everyone, to D&D&D&D&D, Chapter 1, Serpents in the Wind. When we last left off, you guys set back out from Tordage back on the same ship you arrived on, and are making a, fairly lengthy, just from the lack of staffing on the ship, trip to get to the land of Levant, a land currently plagued by storms, as Quetzalcoatl's wind breastplate has been placed there. And that's where you're heading now.
Talk about a power move by Quetzalcoatl there. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna fuck up your whole region when I put this here.
Well, I mean, gotta secure treasure somehow.
Yeah.
So you
treasure
guys
by making him pay him to take it back.
All right, so you guys have been on the ship for about a day now, and going off of the estimate they gave you, you should be arriving in a few days. Red and Flower and Fall, you spent the first day helping, kind of get the ship on course via manning the sails, and Flower and Fall, despite your size, did a pretty good job of it. And Paul, you have once again found employment, swabbing the deck and making it shiny.
Yeah.
And we started the old gag again of the cat that keeps giving him a gold coin every time.
Well, yeah, gotta pay him. Gotta pay the man.
And he always seems so just annoyed that he has to.
Yeah. All right, so I don't imagine that you guys will have the whole lot you specifically want to do over the course of, like, being out at sea for about a week. Basically, if anyone has something, speak up. If not, then I'll kind of cut to whenever, like, we're closing in.
Alright.
I mean, Captain Red's mostly just gonna do stuff on the ship, get drunk with the crew.
Yeah, fair enough. Paul, you just gonna keep cleaning?
I mean, like, clean, and then occasionally, probably, like, cook a bit, here and there.
Go ahead and make a roll for that. Just see how good your cooking is this time around. And while you're doing that, Flower and Fall, do you have anything you specifically want to do, like, before you guys kind of close in on your destination?
True. Let's go talk to the crew.
All right. Anyone in particular you're looking for?
Not really. Just enemy spot.
Okay. Well, real quick. Paul, how'd your cooking go?
Is there any modifiers to it? Or...
Your dexterity and your proficiency if you're proficient.
Dexterity? I don't think I'm proficient in cooking unless you said to me, but that'd be +2, so 18.
All right, and Hunter, real quick, your dice rolling is coming in on the mic, so yeah, thank you. So Paul, you guys settle in for about your third night's dinner. This is where you can do your thing, Flower and Fall, since the crew gathers for dinner. You guys gather in the crew's quarters with the typical kind of easy to quickly set up table for you all to eat upon. Paul, by this point, you've made about 3 gold in total.
It's just mining gold over here.
Yeah, well, to be fair, he's working, so.
Yeah.
And speaking of which,
mining gold over here.
and also, you make an extra 2 for the cooking as well. The meal, as per Paul's fair norm, even when he's working with gross ingredients, is really good. The meal is delicious, and you all tuck into it. The full crew is gathered around, which is fairly notable because you very rarely see the entire crew assembled like this. Flower and Fall, do you want to, like, look around and see if anyone catches your eye, or just pick someone at random? Oh, you want to eeny, meeny, miny, moe it?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, roll me a d10, since there's 10 other crew members, not counting you and your companions.
5.
The captain sits at the very forefront of the table.
Would be the 5th guy on the list.
Yeah. He's he's occasionally like eating one of your freaking yeah. You basically set up a kind of you set up a bit of orcish cuisine, a lot of pork and meat in this particular dish, all
That's
salted.
ironic.
Yeah, all salted to Hades and back to make sure that it's preserved for the trip. And you see the captain every so often kind of yank a piece off and feed it to his Gigi bird.
What is he, an orc?
No, it's just pork. Like it's not like it's just like Paul. The recipe is orcish.
Okay.
Anyway, so Fire and Fall, your attention is kind of caught to the captain. I mean, you can roll it
No, I
again.
mean, like, you specifically noted out the captain. Like, is he an orc?
No, he's a human. I mentioned that in the first part. Most of the crew is human, except for the occasional elf. There is a dwarf on the crew as well, but other than that,
elves be like
human.
the worst ones for this because they have like no durability.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and make some general notes on the crew since you already know what the captain's pretty much like, right, Flower and Fall?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll take this opportunity to kind of describe the crew. Most of the crew is human. A trend you've noticed after being on trips with them for a while is that, and you kind of kept your eyes out for it after Blue Moon noted that this crew is very surprisingly top-of-the-line mercenaries, despite seeming very kind of just quirky and weird. Or you assume that might be a prerequisite at this point. It's mostly humans, with the sole exception of the lookout and the surgeon, who are both elves. A wood elf for the lookout and a light elf for the surgeon. And of course, as you guys well know by now, the cook and lead gunner is a dark elf. And the carpenter, which you guys haven't really talked to at all since being on the ship, is a dwarf. Other than that, though, everyone's human.
From what I understand, it's probably not very common to see elves on these kinds of ships.
It's not at all unheard of, especially because they're one of the common, so like they're the most numerous and easy to find. Typically, though, they work jobs as gunners or lookouts. Either personally not wanting to do manual labor or just not being fit for it. But they do have some surprising, they're more smart than people give them credit for, so they make surprisingly good, like, kind of logistical operators.
I guess, let's go talk with the lookout, because he's probably seen a lot of them working themselves. He's gonna be like, in my experience, the elves usually have the most interesting stories of how they came to the ship. Not the first choice of life for you.
He kind of looks over at you, surprised, before shrugging and says, "I suppose that's fair enough, mate." He kind of leans back a bit, and he notices everyone kind of looking at him, and he kind of smiles awkwardly. It's just like, something on my face. Mary, the swabby, kind of leans forward, sitting next to you, Flower and Fall, leans forward excitedly with both hands on the table, and says, "Well, we've been working on the ship for a while. None of us have really, gotten to know each other. I'm just curious what your story is."
I mean, I was kind of like really into that,
Well, because you guys are at like a small table, so I figured it would just kind of, especially because nobody was really talking beforehand.
Well, that's like what the whole point of Conrad bringing that up is. He's basically trying to suggest he wants to hear it.
Yeah. Oh well, yeah. Like, so yeah, I was just kind of bouncing off of that.
So I had him say that.
Yeah. He kind of leans back a bit and kind of idly slides his tankard of Red Drake back and forth across the table, before shrugging and saying, "Well, I wouldn't know if my story would be super interesting." He kind of taps his fingers awkwardly. It seems like he's not really used to having attention drawn to him. You've gotten the impression after kind of being on the ship with him for a while, because he spends pretty much all day in the crow's nest, sometimes even sleeping up there, only coming down to drink, eat, and then go back up. So you get the impression from that and his kind of general demeanor that he's really not used to like having a lot of eyes on him. But after a while of kind of working up the nerve, he speaks up and says, well, I guess if you just want the whole story, I used to study magical creatures. Ironically, actually at Levant. I worked for Professor Perelman. I think he still works there, actually. And helped him study the various creatures there. I'm don't like to brag, but you could say I'm something of an expert. I can track just about anything, and then he kind of pats his scoped rifle on his back, and then shoot its fucking head off.
Good skill to have, mate.
He nods and says, yeah, but try telling that to the professor who says, I need intact specimens and it's inhumane to kill them. He laughs and takes a swig and says, but I don't have any bad feelings about it. I actually hope he's still working there. I might pop by for a visit. After thinking it over for a bit, he says, but even though we left on good terms, he said he didn't need someone who was a bit better at killing the creatures than studying them, hanging around his laboratory. So he sent me off with his blessing, and I started looking for work. I did some sort of cheap adventure work. Never really stuck out for getting the whole training, so I'm a bit unconventional, I guess you could say. But if a village needed, small dragon or manticore killed, then figured I'd pop by and take care of it. I was having a bit of a drought, though. Adventurers tend to take up those kind of jobs, and do it a bit faster and flashier. I've always liked to take things a bit slow myself. Gives you time to find it and know its moves, and that's whenever our benefactor found me and said that the ship needed a lookout, and figured, and he pats the rifle again, this time kind of rubbing a hand over the scope. Figured it'd be a good job to relax and figure out what I want to do next with myself.
A lot more planned out story than the last elf I talked to as a pirate. You know that Captain Flint guy?
He nods and kind of looks up and says, heard he was dead.
Yeah, I was on his ship for a bit. I was on his ship for a stint right before he had his old problem. And he picked up this young elf. He was a little scrappy little guy. He didn't fit in with the other elves, from what I understand. He got himself a pretty nasty scar, though, recently. People started calling him Stitches. Because he got all these scars all over him.
The swabby leans forward excitedly, kind of bouncing in his seat, and says, oh, that's super cool. Do you have a nickname like that? And the elf just kind of looks at him and just, Smith. No, like, what's your badass name? Like, what do people scream when they see you coming? Smith.
Look, kid, most people on these ships got shit. I only knew 2 pirates who had nicknames. One was that elf, and the other was a big-ass fucking orc.
Well, that's still 2. I figure we could make it a trend. We should have a cool name like that. We should have a name for our team.
Team Nay!
The crew kind of laughs and kind of resumes their eating. Smith, assuming he wasn't kidding, just kind of awkwardly tucks back into his food, seeming kind of glad that the attention is back off of him.
Yeah.
Anyone else has something? Yeah, just.
I mean, I'm just enjoying the show here.
So everyone's here, yeah?
Yeah, whole crew.
Okay. So you said a few elves were here, yeah?
Yeah, there's Smith, who's a wood elf,
Yeah.
the surgeon, who's a light elf, and the gunner and cook, who's a dark elf. Other than that, it's all humans and 1 dwarf.
We want to see the medic.
Okay. He's actually sitting next to Paul, and the 2 of them are just kind of wrapped up in a discussion with the dark elf about various cooking techniques. But whenever he sees you 2 kind of kind of garnering for attention, he leans up, and for the actually very first time since you, because basically how he normally eats is he just kind of pulls his mask up, kind of delicately puts some food in, and then puts the mask back down. But he sees you and kind of shoves the mask up a bit, not to fully reveal his face, but just enough so that his nose and mouth are exposed. And he kind of tucks into a huge leg of mutton before nodding at you silently to say that you can say whatever you want to say.
Who are they talking to again? I'm sorry.
The surgeon, the light elf who Paul cooked with for a bit.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I guess that's like the opposite of a dark elf.
Yes, light elves are basically they're what you think of when you think like elves, like beautiful, kind of arrogant, you know.
This guy wearing a mask must have a really interesting story.
Well, Fall, do you care to find out?
Yes. I was gonna say, so what's your story?
He kind of laughs, and you notice whenever he smiles that a kind of chill goes down your back. Like he doesn't seem malicious, but he just kind of has that air about him. Like even when he does something totally friendly and innocuous, it's really unsettling. He doesn't like really have any prominent scarring. There's like a small one that you can see from under the mask, but other than that, you can't really see anything that would indicate a particularly rough life. But he kind of looks at everyone who, once again, is looking at him expectantly, and just says, so this is dinner and story time, yes?
Yes.
He shrugs and smiles and leans back and kind of pushes his plate away from him. Well, I presume that's going to have to wait then. He crosses his arms and kind of thinks for a minute before gesturing to the tape across the table from him, where someone else in a matching Plague Doctor uniform sits. And he says, for how I ended up here, me and my sibling were just about to graduate from medical school. We were top of the line. I would, make the first incision, remove whatever dirty bits needed to be removed, and the other person leans forward and says, and I would seal them back up.
You two could not sound differenter.
He smiles and says, unfortunately, and they both kind of look down, says, sorry, they never really got a chance to meet our parents, so didn't exactly inherit the accent when you're going to a very prominent school,
Fair enough. Shit
Anyway,
happens.
we were doing our graduation ceremony, so to speak. We had to do a surgery on a dummy in front of an audience. And so far, our duo had been pretty much unstoppable. Only the most impossible beyond repair cases eluded us. We're always together. Always have been. Anyway, unfortunately, they neglected to inform us that the dummy they were using was made of wood. And unfortunately, for sealing, they prefer, and the other person leans forward again, just fire. He kind of winces and says, a lot of people were hurt. I don't know if anyone was killed, but they chased us out and said, so help me God, you will never work in medicine again.
Oh.
So we didn't. But we kept the uniform because they're snazzy, aren't they?
Yeah. Sorry about being kicked out, though.
Don't worry about it. Not long after, our benefactor heard how successful we had been at the academy and said, hey, as long as you don't set my ship on fire, why don't you come work for us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't set a fire, especially in the powder. We had a little, one of the third ship I was on, actually, had a little problem with an arsonist crew member.
The other person leans forward excitedly and is like hanging on to your every word.
Yeah, he was kind of a younger guy. I think he got a little screwed up after a little incident, and he took to fire. One day, most of the crew was off the ship, getting drunk. The next thing we know, There was a big explosion in the harbor. Took out 2 schooners right next to it. It was a big ass freaking man of war. You know how much power they put on those things?
The dark elf leans back with bottle like waving and sloshing in the air. Boom! And the other person in the plague doctor uniform just kind of jiggles in their seat.
Ah, man, it was something though. What a light show. I mean, obviously, the poor kid was in bits, but he was about the only one actually hurt by it because those 2 schooners were empty, although they don't look out on each, and they fell into the water. So yeah, that's the day that's the day a captain lost everything.
The person in the plague doctor uniform kind of reaches into their kind of satchel and pulls out a small torch and is about to bring some kindling to it, but the captain just very quietly pushes the torch down.
No.
Yeah.
But you see, that's how I got it. Like, so for a good period of 10 years, they called me Bad Luck Red, because for about 10 years, every ship I was on had a problem. Then just one day, things started working out again.
The captain
You
just
were
kind of
cursed.
the captain just kind of nods solemnly and says, "Hopefully, this will be the day all of our fortunes turn around." And you see the person in the plague doctor uniform kind of just quietly puts the torch away, very sad. But but their brother just kind of leans across the table and pats them on the shoulder. As he's sitting back down and about to readjust his mask back over his face, he says, "Oh, apologies, it just occurred to me. I forgot to introduce myself." And he kind of leans across the table to, Paul and the swabby having to lean back so that he can reach out 2 fingers to shake your hands, Flower and Fall. And he's smiling and says, "Professionally, I am Dr. Alva Blast, but you can just call me Aphrodite."
Windows startup noise.
Do you need to repeat that like DMY so you can write it down?
No, I heard, like, I'll call by his nickname, but it's just like... Fanful are dumb.
Yeah, it's Elvish.
They have
So.
a -1 to intelligence there, or dumb
They're
little
very
assholes.
They're dumb face.
Yeah. Well, just in case anyone else wants to remember it, it's so full name Aphrodite.
Oh my god, this is like Carly's like second and third character that were like fairies.
Yeah.
She mostly likes dragons and fairies.
Mythical creatures, you know.
Yeah, I like goblins, so fair enough. Yeah.
Just commenting.
Yeah. As a fun side note, by the way, his name in Elvish translates to person who smiles upon pain.
Boy.
Basically,
that's in that kind of trope of like names that are oddly prophetic.
Yeah, but basically, like, it'd be the equivalent of if in English his name was Dr. Schadenfreude.
I was gonna say if his name was Mathis Jones.
Like, imagine like if this guy was in something that just was like just completely not a doctor, like, and he just had that name, and it's just completely out of context.
Yeah.
Like, it just seems like such a silly name.
Yeah. All right. So, anyone else wants to talk to?
I mean,
who else is around, Captain Brad? If we're gonna do this whole checking on stories shit.
I mean, yeah, it seems like the crew is just kind of expecting that to be the case now. I mean, hey, I wrote backstories for everyone, so I can't say it's unappreciated. Next to you, Captain Red, you have the dwarf carpenter immediately to your right, and the second mate immediately to your left. The carpenter is fairly quiet and keeps to himself. You really don't ever see him on the top deck outside of like polishing and checking on a few things. The second mate, you know all of nothing about. You would only see him when he came up to give you orders, and then he would just disappear.
So did you say it's like has a very serious?
One more time, sorry.
Did you say it's like a very serious look a lot?
Yeah, like he just kind of like pops up, gives you an order, and then leaves, and you doesn't stop for small talk.
Hey,
Nice.
serious face. What's your story, man?
Everyone looks particularly interested. You notice most particularly Blue Moon. And Blue Moon almost has this like kind of twinkle in her eye, like, so you gonna tell him kind of look. And he just kind of turns slowly to look at you, Captain Red. For visualization, this is a very tallowed, sunken, almost sickly looking man, human, with stringy black hair dangling in front of his face. He's wearing a gray cloak, but whenever he's on the deck giving whenever he's on the deck giving orders, you see that underneath it he actually is wearing a pretty spick and span scarlet red naval uniform. And he just kind of stares at you for a minute before looking at the rest of the crew. Fine. He pulls out a knife and slams it on the table, just embedding the blade into the wood. My name is Mole. And he kind of stops and stares at everyone before he kind of glances at Blue Moon and says, I was an officer for the naval forces. Unfortunately, I neglected to do my duties as is expected, and now I'm here. And he very simply leans back, and he basically kind of like nudges the knife with his finger as if daring anybody to get more information out of him.
Red's like,
Dare.
yeah, on the fourth ship I was on, she had a crew. He more made a choice, but he also was in that whole naval shit.
The Swabby seems like he's trying to be stealthy, but like it's not at all a good attempt. And leans over to quote unquote whisper to the captain. He's been on 4 ships.
Like I said, kid, for 10 years something went wrong.
He kind of shrinks back into his seat. Sorry.
Hey, so, and
That's a
Red's
lot
gonna
of
be like,
ships.
So many.
you'd be surprised. Well, oh wait, hang on, I'm gonna try this. Well, I mean, people don't say that piracy is known for its low attrition rate.
Now that the
Fair
attention,
enough.
now that the attention is drawn off of him, Mole just quietly takes out a pipe and starts smoking.
Yeah, okay. I guess you gotta look to the dwarf now. It's like, what about you, woodcutter?
He looks up and like it seems like he genuinely hadn't registered that conversation going on around him. And before kind of adjusting himself. So for a bit of backstory and descriptive purposes here, obviously being a dwarf, he's incredibly short. You notice though, very notable for a dwarf, not a single strand of hair, even the shavings of on his chin. But his hair like stands upwards at about his height and is spiked at the top. Bright ginger color.
He's a fucking troll doll.
Yeah, basically, yeah, kind of like that look, except if it was like flat at the top, like basically a crop top troll doll, so to speak. And he's wearing goggles.
Drink on him. He's like a fucking table.
Yeah, he's got goggles slapped over his eyes, which you've never seen him without. Other than that, he's fairly unremarkable physically. He's wearing a fairly nice suit though. And he kind of looks around surprised, and you see Smith leans over to him and just kind of whispers in his ear, presumably catching him up on the conversation he'd missed. Before he leans forward. For any past interaction with him, he also pulls double duty as the ship's quartermaster. So the only interaction you've really had with him up to this point is that he would bring you food and then just leave. It doesn't seem like, unlike Mole, it doesn't seem like he's avoiding you, but judging from this, you can kind of tell that he's often kind of off in his own little world. But he kind of, adjusts his suit before speaking up in a very low, twangy tone. My name's Everett. I'm a dwarf. And the Swabby speaks up very sarcastically. Hi, Everett. But Paul kind of elbows him. He clears his throat and says, as I'm sure you guys have heard stories about, we dwarves tend to be a very inventive lot. But we've never really been interested in any of this, any gestures over to where you can see a cannon sticking through a nearby gun port. But he smiles.
Can I have Red say something?
Yeah, by all means, it's conversation.
The last dwarf part I heard, apparently your kind really does not look kindly on this kind of work.
He shakes his head, kind of looking wistful, and says, "They do not, I'm afraid. Unfortunately for me, I had a proclivity for it. I designed my first cannon when I was very young, and then designed my first rifle a year later. Shortly after, I was exiled." He kind of runs his fingers around the table in these weird patterns, almost like he's kind of visualizing a map as he speaks, and says, "So, I left the Queen and found my way to Reedstown, where there was an opening for people with my set of skills. Worked there for a few years, designing rifles, robots, and whatever else was needed, before eventually our benefactor got a hold of me and said, 'If you want to put your guns on a ship, then take this job.' And, well, how could I say no to an opportunity to actually see my puppies in action?"
You know a dwarf named Keely?
He thinks a bit before saying, "Well, I've heard the name, didn't know him personally. Why?"
Yeah, that's the dwarf I was talking about, the other part.
He nods. He smiles, and this is the first time you've really seen him kind of grounded, and he kind of hops up and kind of toddles over to the cannon and kind of pets it fondly. "So, every single gun on this ship was my own design. I harvested the materials, I smelted them together." And he kind of pulls the barrel up, and you can see an inscription of kind of almost like a cheaty-ified version of his face on each and every barrel. He smiles and says, "And this here's my brand. Hoping maybe someday, if there's a market for a dwarf making guns, I can make myself a little living off of this. I don't like seeing..."
Oh, sorry.
Now you can go.
It's man, what a lucky captain got all of his guns for free.
He kind of toddles back over to the seat and chuckles and says, "Well, it's just a bit of a test run, so to speak. I'm not happy seeing people get hurt by the things I make, but I'm good at it, and it makes me happy, so I figure it's better for me to see what they do before I make the decision to, what's the word humans use, monopolize?"
Depends on the human. And speaking of the captain, great words of wisdom I've used that it's good for to know the captain. So, Captain, what's your story, mate?
So you're gonna look to the big guy with the bird?
Yeah.
He kind of looks at you and shakes his head. "I'm not the captain."
Who's the captain? Who's sailing this ship?
The crew all kind of look to each other, kind of, and the big guy simply taps his very large finger on the table and says, He prefers to eat in the cargo.
Mm.
Now you see, that's called that, and that's what we in the business call a red flag.
Red flag.
He kind of leans forward. I am not in a position where I get to make those sorts of decisions. He has decided, for personal reasons, that he will not be doing his job, so I took his place. But as far as the payroll is concerned, I'm the first mate, not the captain.
I can say in my years of sailing, I have never seen something like that.
He chuckles. Well, I'm not being paid to ask questions. I'm being paid to get you guys where you want to go.
Fair enough. Well, what's your story anyway, mate?
He kind of looks very wistfully into the distance. Like what you see in movies, like, but like actually fairly serious. It's the most like kind of distant you've ever seen him. He sighs through, very big sigh through his nostrils. I come from the Yavik tundra. We lived in a very large, harsh forest. It was me, my wife, and my 2 daughters. But then, about 5 years ago now, there was a blizzard, and we were forced to flee. I lost them in the snowstorm. So, I found my way to the nearest city and started assembling a crew so that I could search the wasteland and try and find them, or if possible, find bodies to at least give them a proper burial. And the first expedition failed, and all lives but mine were lost. So I tried again, to the same result, and again, and again.
Damn.
He kind of counts in his head before saying, 123 men have died under my command, trying to travel that horrible wasteland. But I'm determined to keep trying. I hope, with my cut of whatever you guys find down there, to assemble another crew and try again. I won't give up on them.
You see, a lot of stuff has some nasty statistics against it. That really sucks, mate.
He nods, but shrugs and says, I will not give up until the tundra kills me too. Oh, and, sorry, my name is Sasha, by the way. Sasha Reznov.
Interesting
I
name.
believe in you, Sasha. You can do it.
He smiles and says, thank you, tiny children.
Who? Okay, I just want to check. Who was the people that Captain might have been drinking with?
The dark elf cook, the wood elf lookout, and occasionally when he had time,
The swabby?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess you gotta look at this like, well, hopefully this will lighten the mood. Hey, kid, what's your story?
He rubs his hands together like he's been waiting for this. All right. Well, like I already told everyone simultaneously, Paul, Flower, and Fall included, speak up. Everyone. Yeah. My name's Mary Overidia. Well, what's up? What's funny?
Oh, nothing. It's I just remembered an old joke.
Oh, you should tell it to me sometime. Anyway, back to me. So I was raised in Frisia, near the docks with my ma and my ma. Unfortunately, being on the docks, we weren't exactly the wealthiest bunch. So I took it upon myself to head out to taverns and make bets. If anyone could take me down, then all the gold in my wallet. If I could take everyone in the tavern, all the gold in their wallets. He holds up his knuckles, which you see are like bandaged to cover several cuts and bruises, and smiles and says, "Who do you think wins?"
Well, it looks like you might have won and then got kicked.
He kind of spits a raspberry at you before saying, "So, whenever our benefactor heard of my frankly, amazing reputation as a brawler.
I feel like these guys are all based on the fucking like TF2 squad.
That was some inspiration, but with like a sailing makeover. He kind of cracks his knuckles and says, "So, whenever our benefactor heard of my amazing reputation, they came to me and said, 'Hey, we need a talented set of hands to keep this ship running.' So, well, I mean," he gestures to the three of you and says, "With what kind of money you guys should hopefully rope in from that treasure, I hope I can bring it home to Ma and Ma, and maybe we can get ourselves a nice little farmhouse up the districts."
And generally, the best idea is to get as far the fuck away from Frisia as you can.
He smiles and says, "I can't leave home."
Because, in my experience, I found there's two kinds of people in Frisia. There's the people living on the docks, and then there's all the people that have all the money.
Quick question: what is Frisia like?
Mary kind of actually gets a surprisingly like solemn, not like sad solemn, just very whimsical, like someone telling a story look on his face. Also, real quick before I get into this, Paul/Austin, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, just listen to the stories.
I mean, if he falls asleep, that
No.
stream's gonna go on for a while.
No,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm just dual multitasking here.
Okay, well, if Paul wants to speak up, he can. I
Yeah,
hope
no.
you're at least enjoying the stories.
I am.
All right. But yeah, Mary smiles with a kind of far off look in his face and says, "Ah, it's great. From the docks we can see all the really shining, cleaning buildings. Pretty much everything's made of gold. There's gold all over the streets that you can find. The docks are a little grungy, but we do what we can down there."
Like I said, there's the people living on the docks, and then there's the people living in the houses made of fucking gold.
He smiles and says, "Well, I like to think of it this way. There's the people who have everything, and then there's the people who are about to."
Optimistic view.
I do what I can. Someone's got to keep a happy face around here, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you two share very tiny high fives.
Yeah.
Hooray.
I guess Red's now gonna ask his other drinking buddy, the Dark Elf. What's your story, mate?
The dark elf kind of smiles and kind of nudges you, Paul, and says, "It's funny. I thought you'd be the one asking me that."
Well, I mean, I would, but there's so much stuff to do on the ship.
Don't worry about it, mate. I'm just ribbing you. Anyway, well, I am Tut Via de Gua, part of the de Gua royal family.
Ah, shit. We got some real fucking royalty up. Shit.
That's a bit far off from the truth, mate. You ever seen the Dark Elf City before?
Not in a long fucking time.
He smiles and says, "Then you'd know that there's not exactly kings down there. There's queens, and the king being ordered by the queen."
Yeah, I do remember that. And let's just say I had an incident there, and that's why I've never been to another Dark Elf city.
Anyway, so, since I knew I didn't have a shot at the crown, I decided to try my hand at cooking. And I made some good dishes, and he gestures to the dinner that he helped Paul prepare. And I had some that didn't go so well. And he pulls from his jacket a small black powder grenade that he sets on the counter and smiles and says, "So, I got good at both."
Yeah.
He quickly pockets it before it starts rolling around on the table and smiles and says, "So, I got good at a lot of things. I was an adventurer for a while, actually. But turns out not a lot of call for a male dark elf in the city, not a lot of call for a dark elf period on the surface."
So you took to the sea.
He smiles and nods. I had just gotten my first year out of the academy. I'm about level 5 now. And every party that I signed up for said, we don't want a dark elf cook, we want an assassin or a rogue. But our benefactor found me, heard legends of the Dubois family, and said, hey, what can you do? And I said, I can cook, and I can make stuff blow up. And here I am.
A good combination.
Yeah, damn right! And he like chucks the bottle and it smashes. Oh.
It blows up the ship. Yeah.
Who hasn't been asked yet?
So far, you don't know the other person in the Plague Doctor uniform's name, but you can obviously infer their backstory from Dr. Alvablast. The only one besides that person who hasn't been talked to yet is the captain himself and the bosun.
What's a bosun?
The bosun is basically, think of them as third mate.
Okay. What's the bosun description?
All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure that's they're a human, but just glancing at them, like he's a mess, frankly. You have never seen him without a bright red bandana tied around the top of his head, but it covers the entire front of his face. But you notice his movement has never really been impaired by that. And he's missing a hand that he has very haphazardly replaced with a spade that's just kind of tied with some rope to the stump. And he's always got 2 guns strapped to his back and several more around his belt. And he's currently just going to town on a leg of meat.
Hey, the guy that looks like Hammered Shit. What's your story? You gotta have a good one.
And he kind of slams the leg of meat down and around before the first mate just kind of gently nudges him and whispers into his ear, and he looks over at you. But you notice he looks at you but kind of looks slightly to the right, sort of as if he's kind of approximating where you are, before he kind of leans forward and says, is it my time for story time? And everyone just kind of nods. And he just sits there silently before Mary speaks up. Oh, yeah. And he just, all right, speak up. He stands up very attentively, like a plank of wood, and says, I am General Iverstater. I was a admiral in the Golden Fleet of Frisia. Unfortunately, he holds out his arm with the spade dug into it, and uses that to lift up the bandana, and you can see milky white eyes beneath the bandana before he pushes it back down and says, they decided after a unfortunate incident with a cannonball, I was no longer fit for duty. He kind of deflates a bit and says, but not a lot of work for someone like me, and don't really have a lot of skills outside of giving orders and fighting. But that's when our benefactor found me and said that they had a place for me on the ship. And he's starting to look really awkward now. He went from completely straight-faced and loud to really kind of shrinking into himself and deflating. Before he kind of gives a salute with his spade hand before sitting back down kind of unpromptly. First mate Sasha just kind of nods and says, I suppose we are quite the crew of misfits then, it sounds like.
Hey, in my experience, those are the best crews. Because those are the ones they can't predict.
Smith holds up his drink. I'll drink to that, mate. And Dubois holds up his as well, and eventually the whole crew is toasting.
Hey.
Well, I guess Red's just gonna be like, well, we've heard most of y'all's stories, or can infer. Anyone want to hear the adventure of Captain Red?
Oh.
Everyone kind of smiles and back. And Smith kind of takes up a leg of meat and kind of waves at you, like, go on for gnawing into it.
Oh, well, early part of my story isn't very interesting. Just grew up and spent some time in Nottingham, some time in Frisia. Then, here's for the first through third ship, I was a humble cabin boy. That's where after an incident with a claimed she was a witch. I didn't believe that shit. But that's whenever the 10 years of bad luck started. But by the time I was about ready to start working full time, luckily it passed. And I wound up only having 2 more ships out of the first 4 before I owned my own ship. Some blasted pirate caught us in a bad area.
The crew all kind of wince.
Caught us in a bad place. Lost my whole ship, my whole damn crew, and I thought for sure I lost myself. Let's just say I made a new friend who's gonna help me remedy the problem.
You notice Anna kind of like tightens and just very curtly continues eating.
So that's why I stay out here at the sea. So looking for a pirate hunter, want to trap me in that shoal. When I find him, I'm gonna burn his damn ship, and I'm gonna send every one of his crew to sea.
The crew nod, and after kind of finishing off his meat, Smith nods and says, "Well, we'll do what we can to see you get the chance, mate."
Yeah, if you ever hear of a guy called Saul, that's who I'm looking for. Some old Navy trout who thinks he's hot shit.
The crew nods, and Sasha turns to you, Flower and Fall, and says, "And what of our littlest friend? What's your story?"
Oh. They both like kind of rub their tiny chins thoughtfully, and say, "Well, you know, we were both orphans that just kind of flew around the forest causing trouble. The nights and all of that were hard. But we met a good friend, and he was our best friend for a long time. But then he got into some strange trouble, and things took a downturn from there." Just kind of like look wistfully off into the distance.
Mary kind of swallows what he was already chewing on. Says, "What'd he do?"
Oh, well, he stole an artifact and, well, kind of almost destroyed everything.
Everything.
It just spits out his drink. Well, I think that tastes the cake right there.
Everyone just kind of nods, kind of almost contemplatively. You know, there's a lot of the crew kind of looking at you like, wow. Eventually, Sasha finally turns to you, Paul, and says, "And what about you, unspoken swabby?"
Well, there's not much to my story, honestly. Not even that I know too much. Before I knew it, I was a servant. Before that, all I can remember was being very cold. And then
Mysterious.
You notice Sasha kind of tightens up a bit and pats you on the shoulder.
He knows the feeling of cold very well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have reasons behind it, you know. background stories that not even Paul knows.
The crew nod, and Sasha in particular, he surreptitiously slides you a couple extra gold and says, "Thank you for sharing. We'll do whatever we can to help you find what you've lost."
Well, I
Uh,
can think of one more person who might need to go into their story. Hey, where's that blue sun or whatever her name is?
You notice Blue Moon just kind of staring completely flat-faced at you, and she signs, Blue Moon.
Yeah. You see, I knew it was some kind of celestial body.
Wait, can you understand her now?
I figure somebody translated.
Yeah, probably.
Um, Everyone kind of looks at Blue Moon, and you notice Mole kind of stops smoking really abruptly and just kind of stares at her. Blue Moon kind of looks around, but she seems pretty unperturbed by the attention, and starts to sign. Actually, I'm not that different from Paul. I don't really remember a whole lot. I got into, and she kind of lightly pulls one of her machetes out of its sheath before gently sliding it back, before continuing. Not too long after I lost contact with my father, and came here on a job, and that's whenever these three found me.
Simple enough, I guess.
She smiles and signs, kind of quietly under the table, since Paul and Flower and Fall are both on her side of the table, and signs under the table, just like you.
Oh, so Flower and Fall, for one, just yeah, and two, just kind of like look in a general direction towards everyone. It's like, how come you guys called the captain benefactor instead of captain?
Stasha speaks up. Well, the captain is not our benefactor. In fact, the captain was hired by our benefactor. And the benefactor is the same person who sent the three of you on this little quest.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah,
Princess really
for-
likes to pull a lot of strings, huh?
And yeah, for a bit of a review, just because you guys may have forgotten, yes, in part one, the reason three of you are together on this is because someone you don't know just basically said, hey, there's a cut of the treasure if you manage to find it, so you decided to go for it, and this was the crew and ship they hired to transport you. Oh, hang on, I got a phone call, so you guys can discuss this.
bye.
Fuck whoever did that. Maybe it was a scam call and he'll be back in 5.
Good.
Considering he's
calls.
not back already, it probably wasn't.
I don't even answer that shit. If it's a scam, likely. I'm like,
No,
No, that's what I mean. He wouldn't have answered.
Well, it's like, how do you know it's a scam until... If
my
it's
phone
just,
tells me.
Well, yeah, unless your phone
If
tells you.
If it's really close to your number, it absolutely is a scam. Although anything else, I just don't answer unless I don't like know the number, because it's not like I need to know anyone outside. You know. If I don't know you, don't call me. If you really want to get in touch with me, you leave a voicemail or text me or something.
Or call again.
Yeah, or call again. But even then, I still won't answer.
I don't know. Well, that's it. Like, you know what? Could be something interesting. I'll listen
Sorry,
to it.
I missed anything?
No.
For context, by the way, my mom just needed medicine.
Okay. We were just talking about like our calling policies with scam numbers and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Alright,
Matthew,
so...
you're the kind of person who's like, I don't answer a call if I don't know the number.
Oh, yeah, no, they can text
That's
me
me.
if they need me.
Exactly.
Anyway, so just picking up where we left off. So the benefactor is who hired you. The captain is a completely different person, also hired by the benefactor, but you've never seen them.
So yeah. I mean, it's still character for them to completely fucking forget. It's been
totally.
like months.
No, absolutely. So yes, so like, I'm not like criticizing it. That's why I had them just respond as if a character. So.
Alright, I got some. Alright, so for Captain Red's gonna say, and you know what? When I was a boy, just starting out as a cabin boy, the first captain I had, he told me, watch out for people who be pulling the strings, boy. They the ones who you should be looking out for. He's a very, very spoken man.
The crew all kind of nod contemplatively before Mary eventually speaks up. Yeah, why are we even on this voyage if we don't know who's paying us? And Degois pipes up, money. Sasha nods, money. Everett from his he's like sketching something on a small napkin, money. Smith and Mole both simultaneously, money. Before Mary just kind of sits down. Fair enough.
Yeah, in this line of work,
Money talks.
Money talks, and a lot of people don't want to.
Yeah.
Some say money's the only thing that talks business.
Everyone nods. You notice Mole kind of chuckles a bit before resuming smoking. Eventually, Sasha turns to Anna and Professor Plaster and says, well, I suppose you're the last ones besides the captain. Would you like to share? Professor Plaster, kind of similar to some of the others, seems kind of awkward that the attention's on him, but he seems like he was kind of expecting it, so he has time to kind of adjust himself. Oh, well, I don't think we have enough time on the voyage for my entire story. But believe it or not, I actually used to be an adventurer in my youth.
Isn't he like a tree man?
Plaster?
Yes, he is a dryad.
The tree man adventure. That sounds interesting.
He smiles and nods and says, yes, while I never led any party myself, I was quite the capable fighter on several journeys. How do you think I came to be so knowledgeable? Sorry, ice. And he kind of continues. But whenever the adventuring lifestyle became a bit too demanding for someone of my stature, I decided to take up teaching and open up a small school not too far from Tordage. But eventually, I decided that my studies needed a bit of amendment, so to speak, and came to Tordage to do some archaeological work. And that's whenever all of you found me. In fact, Miss Anna, and she kind of pats on the back, was one of my top students when I came here, and she came with me. She nods and smiles proudly. Yep, I've been into archaeology ever since I was a little girl. Always loved digging around in the yard trying to find bones and stuff. So I figure, finding lost cities and ancient treasures and fighting cultists is pretty much the same as pretending to find dinosaur bones when you're 5.
You're right.
So.
Everyone just like, it was bad.
Oh, you.
Anyways, what's up, Paul?
What? I said so.
Yeah.
So. Oh, my neck.
What were you saying? I'm sorry.
I just said so.
Oh, okay. As I like for some reason just registering it. So okay. Anything else from the rest of you?
So the captain okay or no?
Sasha kind of pushes his plate away. He's kind of finished most of his food by now, and sighs. Well, I suppose he's okay as anyone can be. He mostly stays in the hold and drinks, and whatever food we bring him, he eats. Other than that, we don't really hear too much from him. That's why I sort of unofficially took the title of captain. Whatever it was, he won't tell us. He nods and says, yeah, we didn't really know each other before now. I mean, apparently a lot of us come from similar roots, right? And he kind of does finger guns to Admiral Iverstater, who obviously can't see him, so he just kind of continues eating. He's like, right. Yeah, we don't know too much about him. In fact, I only saw him the once.
Yeah, you see, that has me worried.
If you wish to speak to him, he won't stop you. But be warned, he's not dangerous, but I can't guarantee he'll tell you anything.
I put it on my to-do list.
with that, Sasha stands up and takes his plate and his mug, and he kind of gives you a bow, Paul. Thank you so much for your contributions to the voyage.
No problem.
And thank you all for being here. I hope that this voyage will be the sign of tides changing in our favor. And with that, he lumbers out of the room and shuts the door behind him, and the rest of the crew kind of nod and start getting ready to pack away themselves.
I guess Cotton Red's gonna find the red drake.
All right. I mean, it's just like kind of around, so it's not going to be difficult for you to find one. So you get yourself a bottle.
He's like, "Hi, who's ready for a drink?"
Degois kind of starts limping towards you, already clearly incredibly wasted. But Smith kind of grabs him by the shoulder. Yeah, sorry, we've already had quite a bit. Take you up on that tomorrow, though.
Yeah, fair enough. He just like pops open the top and just starts downing it.
As he leads Degois out, Degois is just kind of drunkenly kind of blurring, just, I love story time.
Yes.
I love story time.
Yeah. Mary is just kind of gathering up whatever bits of food did not land on the plate, just doing his job. Dr. Alvablast and the unknown other person in the Plague Doctor uniform are just kind of talking quietly in the corner. Mole is just finishing off his pipe. And Everett seems like he's just going to be there drawing on his napkin for the foreseeable future.
I just thought of something. Sorry. Red, I heard there was some big legs or something, right?
Oh yeah, yes, legs of like mutton.
He's gonna grab like 2 of those, and it seems like a bit excessive for him, but it's not for him.
Yeah.
It's to keep the other guy sated.
Yeah.
So he's gonna go find. He's gonna go like below deck, not quite to where the captain is yet, but like just out of sight to deal with that problem.
Okay, so you go tend to your meat-related debacle. Flowerfall and Paul, you have anything you want to take care of before bed?
Flower and Fall kind of look at each other, and with the kind of spiritual cat slit eyes, I'll go slink off to the captain's quarters.
Well, that'd be the cargo hold, so.
To the captain's quarters.
Yeah. Paul?
I guess I will. I'm not sure what to do to him at night. I guess I'll have him. I'm actually gonna do something probably reckless. I'm not gonna sleep tonight.
All right. Well, I mean, you still got a few days before you get there, so. So what do you want to do?
I'm going to just overnight surprise cleaning. Just spotless everything.
Sure, that works. So, Flower and Fall, since you are going below decks, Captain Red, would you make me a stealth check and contested by Flower and Fall's perception check?
Okay.
Yeah,
Let me go pull up his character sheet. See if they notice him feeding the beast.
Yeah. See if they, see your debacle.
Witness.
Witness me.
Oh, he's probably gonna get better. So.
What'd you get?
6.
I get +2 to stealth.
Well, you just need a 4 or 5.
I got a 7 with modifier.
All right, Captain
We
Red,
just-
you did.
Just barely.
Yeah, so Captain Red, you disappear to the gun deck to tend to your situation, and just as you're returning to visibly normal human, you hear the ding of Flower and Fall fluttering down the stairs, and they turn to see you.
Because of how close it is, like, I think he's just gonna like leave, but then they'll maybe see like the bones from the mutton just completely cleaned.
Yeah, sure. So Red kind of rushes past you guys, not like stopping for anything, and you just notice a few legs of mutton completely stripped, where he was standing.
Boy, he was hungry.
Well, I mean, technically they've already seen it in battle because he used it
Yeah,
in
but
that
it's
first
like
fight.
best not to call attention to it, I guess.
Yeah, the crew doesn't know after all. So before we get to Paul's thing, Flower and Fall, you want to talk to the captain?
Yes.
All right.
Gonna
So
bother him.
all right, you head below deck, and this area smells terrible because it's a mixture of the stench of heavily fermented alcohol mixed with the swill of bilge this below in the ship. Your nose is immediately kind of wrinkle pretty harshly. And looking around you, you can make a perception check if you want to see more, but just immediately in your vicinity, you see a lot of barrels of, well, cargo. It's the cargo hold. Near a bunch of barrels, though, is the ones kind of furthest to the opposite wall of the entrance, is stretched some parchment that just kind of acts as sort of makeshift desk of sorts. It almost looks like an improvised study, and sitting in front of it is a man kind of hunched in a chair. You can't really make out any features because it's pretty dark down here, and the only light is coming from a small lantern on top of one of the barrels.
Turns out he died.
As far as perception, I got a 19.
Okay. You kind of get a closer look, and you
something.
You see several black powder grenades are kind of scattered haphazardly around the room. And you had flown over it, but you notice at the bottom of the stairs is a tripwire that you hadn't set off because you just kind of hover. And look, you just notice a lot of like kind of improvised booby traps, like just kind of scrounged from whatever resources could be gathered on the ship. Looking at the man,
fucking barnacles.
Looking closer at the man, you see he's wearing kind of camouflage, a beret and pants. Doesn't seem to be wearing a shirt. He's a dark-skinned man with epic white mutton chops. Like you could pull these mutton chops off and eat them as mutton chops. But you notice you notice the right side is like shaven down to a stubble, but the left mutton chop is left there, and he has this awesome mustache. Like this guy is awesome looking, but you notice that he does not seem to be in the prime of his health. He's just swilling from a half-empty bottle and does not even seem to have noticed your entry.
At least he's not like dead down there. Like he just crawled into.
Yeah, no, he seems very much alive, just sad.
Hey, mister!
He doesn't respond like immediately, but he just kind of slowly turns. And you hadn't noticed this immediately because you were kind of taking in everything in the low light. But you notice he doesn't turn like as in get out of the chair or turn the chair around. He wheels the chair to look at you. It appears that he is confined to a wheelchair. And you notice looking over the wheelchair that there's a bunch of like various black powder objects strapped to it.
He's like a living tank.
Basically, yes, that's actually a very good way to picture it. And he just kind of stares at you, and you see that his eyes have gone yellow from presumably his very poor health condition. And he doesn't say anything, he just stares at you.
Why are you always hiding down here?
He kind of stares for a little bit before taking a swig from his bottle, and in a very low, bassy tone. I choose to.
Why?
I'm Batman.
So he said, why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He same prop, very slow. Like basically, if he doesn't look super old. His hair is kind of whitened, but he doesn't seem like crotchety or anything. But you get the impression if he was, he would be like creaking as he moved. And takes another swig before staring at you some more and saying, "Because I want to."
And I'm Batman.
But why do you want to?
He kind of stares at you.
Are we gonna play this game?
Yeah. I mean, the captain or the first mate said you probably weren't going to get anything. He continues to stare at you, Flower and Fall, before simply saying, "I heard what was going on above. I don't imagine you have time for another story."
We have all night.
I just imagine they just like shrink a seat down.
Well, Flower and Fall,
Take a shirt.
maybe a persuasion check.
Hey, what's that?
Persuade him to tell your story.
Un,
No, because he clearly
Oh,
doesn't want
shit,
to.
oh, shit.
Yeah.
uno.
He clearly doesn't want to, but he's going to. It's
Well, I mean,
also a 19.
He stares at you before kind of with his free hand pushing a seat towards you and spinning it around. He seems fairly dexterous, if a little bit slow, and just kind of gestures to the seat for you to sit down.
Hey, they'll well, not awkwardly, but they'll sit down, but it'll look awkward.
Oh, it's okay. He grabs a nearby bottle, holds it out to you. You drink.
We never have before, but we sure can try.
He nods and very unceremoniously just plops the whole bottle in front of you.
Hey, they could shrink it down.
Well,
No, yeah, it's just like he's not like bothering with the grace of like pouring them a shot or anything. Just like, well, here you go.
They have shared
Yeah.
minds. Does that mean they get double drunk?
Double drunk!
And technically, only one body would be feeling the effect.
That's true.
Yeah.
He takes another swig before leaning back in his wheelchair, and he starts to tell his story. My name is Boa. I was an adventurer a long time ago. I was the best damn grenadier this side of Perugia. And he takes another swig. But it didn't last long. Or rather, it felt like it was going to last forever, and these things never do. We were summoned to a village, not far from Borsagras, and the village had come down with a plague. No cure, killed almost everyone. The survivors paid me and my partner top dollar to visit the plague doctor and beg for a cure or fight him for one. We went to the Badlands, found the crumbling castle, in we went, and he kind of stops and pauses for a really long time before just taking a large chug, polishing off the bottle before just tossing it haphazardly to the side as it shatters. The plague doctor is a sadistic heathen god. He killed my wife, made sure that it was painful, promised that she'd be used for test subjects for daring to defy his will. I was forced to leave. And he gestures to his wheelchair, and this is all that's left.
Hmm.
He grabs another bottle and starts to drink out of it before continuing. I lost everything that day. My wife, my job, my legs. Whenever someone asks me, hey, I want the great Boa Thaun on my ship, making sure that the crew stays in line and learns from a once great adventurer, I figured, why not? What more could I lose?
Hmm. They just kind of like like looking just like, well, I'm sorry that all happened. Seems pretty terrible. Whatever this plague doctor man did.
He just kind of gets like a far off look in his eyes, like he's almost having a flashback before he kind of comes back down to earth, and he kind of looks at you almost as if he's like just registering your presence completely, and says, "You're adventurous too, aren't you?"
Yeah.
He kind of points his bottle at you and says, "If you want my advice, as soon as we get to shore, you leave and you never look back. The adventurer's life is one of pain and loss. Your friends up there," he takes a swig, "if they survive this quest, it'll be a bloody miracle. That's what always happens." And he takes another swig.
He's knocking that bottle back faster than Captain Red.
Yeah, it seems like he's
Yeah.
basically subsisting on alcohol and rations.
Yeah. It's kind of, just kind of quiet, like take a moment and just kind of like, sit in silence for a moment, just like, well, that's just what adventuring is. Sometimes you lose everything, but that shouldn't stop you from continuing to live,
He just kind of stares at you. Like he kind of has like a very bleary, distant look in his eyes. Like you can just tell. You don't need the 19 perception check to tell. This is a broken human. Uh,
Mhm.
and says, "Suppose that's true, but nothing left for me to lose."
There's nothing left to lose, then that makes it easy to go back up.
He just kind of stares at you, and it actually seems like your words kind of connect to him. Like he kind of has a brief. You see the faintest spark in his eyes before his eyes just kind of cross and close, and he just leans back in his chair, and the bottle drops to the floor.
He just passes out.
Yeah, yes, that's what happened.
Rip.
Just kind of pat his head. Just this poor sad man.
All right. Anything else you want to do?
Confiscate all of his alcohol.
Wow.
No
You-
more. No
you
more
want
for
to?
you. Yes.
You're gonna take all this out.
All right, go for
Maybe
it.
it might actually
not-
get him to come
I'm
out
not
of
like
there.
stealing it from him
Yeah.
per se. It's more just like taking
move
it.
it.
Stop
Yeah,
drinking.
I know,
No.
yeah,
Yeah,
like,
move
take
it out of the
away-
cargo hold.
You're taking
Yes.
away from him.
I mean,
Okay,
at the very
well-
least, he's gonna have to come out of the cargo hold to find it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, he's passed out, and you can fly to avoid the booby trap, so you don't need to make me a stealth or sleight of hand check. So yes, you basically spend a good chunk of the night moving just crates and crates of various
And
alcohols.
everybody on the top deck just watches him coming up with just all this alcohol.
Yeah, yeah, she's basically moving it from the very bottom of the ship to kind of the mid. Just because
Yeah,
I
and
assume you
then
probably don't.
they're all just. Whoever's awake.
Yeah, most of the crew's asleep, so nobody's
Yeah.
paying you too much mind. Speaking of which, though, while you're doing that, that brings us to Paul. So, Paul, you've never actually before now been on the ship in like the dead of night like this. It's very nice, it's just this nice quiet over the dark sea. The ship continues to sail into the horizon. Stars twinkle in the sky. The only one on the top deck.
Twinkle, little star.
The only one on the top deck with you is the other person in the plague doctor uniform, and they just kind of follow you around, not like bothering you, just kind of watching you as you swab the deck.
He's just watching you creepily, breathing over your shoulder.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I ignore him.
Them.
Them.
You technically don't know their gender.
Oh no.
Saying
You
that
noticed.
there's two of
Yeah,
them.
you noticed that their brother corrected himself to specifically saying them. So, so they are gender fluid. Um. But yeah. So they don't bother you if you don't talk to them. They're just kind of carrying a torch and just kind of watching over. You get the impression that this is probably like who watches the ship at night to make sure nobody's like sneaking aboard.
This
Hmm.
man could have been a fucking Undertaker. Fit right the.
Alright.
So, yeah. So if you don't, if you're just gonna swap the deck, that's fine. Just figured
Wow.
I'd mention that there's opportunity for conversation if you want to.
Nah, I'm gonna ignore him and I'm gonna clean the side. I'm gonna try to clean the side of the ship. Like, I don't know. Do they have one of those, like,
Yeah, yeah, the little like kind of little planks where you can like throw it over with some rope.
yeah, sure. Just
Okay.
I want to clean up the side as well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're just gonna do this all night,
Pretty
like not.
much.
She's just gonna clean
Go
the
to
ship
sleep.
spotless.
Yeah.
All right. So you proceed to do that. Like I'm not gonna like make you roll for it or anything. It's fairly routine, and you have a mate up top helping you. So if you did run into any trouble, it's not like it wouldn't be noticed. Um, you do notice something that that had kind of eluded the rest of you. Like nobody had asked about it. Nobody really paid it much mind. When you go to clean the back of the ship, you see the name of the ship printed across the back. This brig is called the Breaker.
Oh.
Oh. Was it meant to sail the Arctic? So it's breaking ice.
But, alright, interesting. Very
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah, just figured I'd mentioned it because it hadn't come up yet.
Yeah.
All right, so nothing else in particular you want to do? You're just gonna clean?
I mean, we gotta get a clean ship, man.
It's clean. The ship's gonna be like spotless.
Yeah. So, you guys good to keep going?
Yeah.
Qua?
Maybe like one more hour,
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, you guys wake up the next morning, just because there's actually a specific thing here. Otherwise, we might cut ahead. So we'll give you some time. Anyway, you guys wake up the next morning, flower and fall, but sore from the crate moving. But Captain Red, you're satiated, you and your friend, and you guys wake up and head to the top deck to start the day, and the ship is spotless.
Holy
like-
shit!
You notice as soon as the crew kind of comes up top to take this in, the other person in the plague doctor uniform just kind of like not really talking to anybody, just heading to below deck to sleep. Because they've been up all night too.
Yeah.
Mary looks around and she says, "Holy crap! Does that mean I don't have to? Does that mean I don't have to mop anymore?" Sasha steps forward. Swabby Paul.
Holy shit!
Paul.
What? Oh, what? Paul?
He says, "Swabby Paul."
Sloppy Paul? I?
The cleanest whole ship.
Yes? What do you need?
Yeah, so you gotta go, and you guys notice that Paul looks pretty ragged. It seems like he's been up all night. Sasha simply tosses you a sack containing 10 gold, and kind of jabs you in the chest and says, "Next time, sleep. We have a swabby to help you." With that, he heads up to the wheel to start navigation for the day. The rest of the crew kind of starts to part and get to their jobs, but like almost the entire crew stops to pat you on the shoulders or back as they pass you.
Holy shit, Paul! I ain't never seen a ship this clean ever. Honestly,
Nothing a little elbow grease can't do.
I don't think I've ever seen like a Navy ship this fucking clean.
Yep. How much money have I made?
So you made. I'm probably gonna get this wrong. I assumed you were writing it down.
To be honest, no. But anyway, if I get like a little bit off, whatever.
Well, yeah, it's just this is why I encourage you to like not be multitasking so you don't miss something.
Well, I'm done right now. Yeah.
Fair enough. So you made 10 just then. Let's see, you made 2 for helping with dinner, and
One for a day cleaning.
yes, and you're gonna make that pretty much every day. So, so by the end of this trip, just go ahead and tally it up to a total of 6. So 10, 2 for cooking, and then 6 for cleaning during the trip.
All right. So 10 to 6. That's 18.
All right, so you made 18 gold on this
Not
trip,
bad.
assuming you don't do any more like crazy amounts of cooking, which you can if you want to make a little bit extra, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys have anything on your mind today, or are you just kind of content to continue the trip?
Yeah.
You know, Riley, just
Paul's tired.
drink with the crew
All right,
and
so
sleep.
yeah. All right, and Flower and Fall, anything?
Hmm. Make sure all the alcohol is still here.
He has not come up. The alcohol has not been touched. You can make a perception check if you want to be sure, but as far as you can tell, just looking, like seems like it hasn't been touched. You haven't heard from the captain at all, so you assume that he kept the completely one-sided agreement you've made and is staying away from it for a while.
One-sided, yeah.
The agreement that we decided.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So is that all you're
Just
gonna
one day in the middle of the trip. Hey, free booze!
do?
And for now.
Okay. Flower and Fall, as tuck into bed. Paul, you pretty much sleep all day. As you tuck into bed, Flower and Fall, you notice each of you has had a gold piece slipped into your pocket over the course of the day.
How did they slip a gold piece into a fairy's pocket?
Very carefully.
Oh, man.
It's more like just slipping it onto their body.
Yeah. The question's
There
like,
you
how are you gonna slip
There
a
you
gold
go.
in there? Either way.
But yeah, basically that's the first mate paying you for moving crates around last night.
How does he know? Nobody knows.
To be fair, he saw that crates were moved, and you can presume he probably just asked around, and nobody else was taking credit for it. So, and he knows Paul was up all night cleaning. So if he was moving cargo around, he probably, frankly, wouldn't have had time. And let's be real, he probably just assumed that it wasn't Captain Redhead.
Brad's solution would have been to drink it all before
Yeah.
he could.
If that's everyone's very specific things out of the way, you guys sail through the rest of the trip across the sea for, very, very little incident. There's the occasional like, oh, someone tripped and fell, and you kind of rib them about it before patching them up. Nothing particularly insane happens. On the
No,
fifth
like
day,
krakens come out of
Yeah.
the sea.
yeah. So on the 5th day, the first
A
mate
kraken
kind of
comes out of the sea.
don't give me any ideas. The first mate kind of waves the 3 of you over and points into the distance and offers a spyglass if anyone wants to use it. And in the distance, you can see a very distant horizon of presumably Levant.
Hey, we're here.
It's pretty far. It'll be the next day, but before you get there. But you can see it on the horizon, and over it, you see this just massive storm cloud. And like even now, you're kind of
Is
feeling
it just
some.
like scattered storm clouds, or is it like a giant hurricane?
No, it's like a hurricane, like all concentrated over this landmass. And even this far away, you guys are getting a little bit of like the sails will occasionally kick with a burst of wind, or like you'll feel water droplets on your face, but it kind of goes away quickly. Like the weather is already starting to get a little wild this far out. And the first mate nods grimly and says, "We will arrive at our destination tomorrow. It's not going to be safe waters to sail."
Hey, Matthew.
What's up?
What's something that people do when they have to sail? They can't just hide below the deck.
I mean, that's actually pretty much because bear in mind, most actually IRL crews would just say nothing is worth sailing through a storm.
Mm.
You would lose literally a lot of would lose like a third of or half their crew just trying to sail through it, let alone like potentially be dealing with hazards.
What kind of things would minimize that?
Just keep crew off the mast. You're going to lose some navigation ability, but that's a small price to pay. Make sure pretty much anybody who
Should you go like short sail so there isn't a whole bunch of sail
pretty
getting
much, yeah, like you're basically not going to be able to steer, but it's better than people slipping off the mast and dying. Now, if you were desperate, what some crews would do is tie ropes around their waist so that if they fell, it would catch them, but sometimes it would be too long and slam on the deck to their death, or it would snap and they would go flying into the abyss.
Oh shit.
So there's no
I
really
just read the Red's like, oh, I guess you better get ready to make sure the sails don't go flying off.
We'll do what we can. We may not have sailed together, but from what I'm told, this ship has seen some mighty voyages before, and he kind of looks at the crew of misfits you guys have assembled on a blaster and Blue Moon included, and says, I think this crew can sail through it fine.
Yeah.
Red has rope. Oh, yeah, Red does have. So Red just gets out. Red also get the rope ready. Last time we sailed for this shit, and it wasn't pretty. The best thing to do, make sure you have some rope to tie yourself to something in case shit goes wrong.
He nods and kind of strokes his bird, who's kind of getting twitchy and agitated from the storm, and says, of course. We will be fine. Concentrate on your own safety and the success of the quest.
Yeah.
So he kind of heads back to doing his duties, and you guys just kind of have a moment together alone at the bow of the ship, just looking at the distant landmass that is your destination. Captain Red, you kind of have to put a hand to your head. You're wearing a hat, right, of some kind?
I believe so.
Yeah, so you kind of have to put a hand to your head as a gust of wind threatens to like kick it off. And Paul, you can hear kind of ting 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 as a few raindrops hit your shield. And Flower and Fall, you're already kind of
Without drowning.
yeah. Flower and Fall, your wings kind of having to like flap a bit harder to shake off any excess water.
You're gonna be able to like fly in this because I'm like
No.
Just gonna have to go inside.
One of the twins can ride on each of you to negate that issue.
is that it? Because I've heard like a lot of things. Small wings can't fly when they get wet.
Nope.
They won't be able to fly, but they will be able to stick with us and not fly away.
We'll be fine.
Cut to tomorrow. We're not fine.
We're not okay. Please help.
As the ship just goes like completely vertical down a wave.
So you guys just have a moment.
Like look at a wave nearby and we just see a fucking bloop inside the fucking wave.
But yeah, you guys just have a moment, and even you can't hear it from this far away, but you can already see like some distant flashes of lightning and just this like gray mist of unending rainfall. Like it is a fucking disaster over there.
I just imagine Paul is just laughing nervously.
It just reminded me of my job. That's all.
So, any preparations before you arrive tomorrow?
Don't die.
Captain Red's just gonna have his rope on the ready to time mast if he needs to.
Yeah, Flower and Fall.
It's gonna be like whenever two guys from Pirates of the Caribbean tied themselves to the mast.
Yeah, basically.
And then, but of course, they were flipping, and they woke up upside down.
Yeah. So Flower and Fall, you were saying? I'm sorry.
Make tiny raincoats.
Do you have the materials?
No.
I'll say that you like borrow some cloaks and shrink them down.
Yeah.
Just because I don't even think you have the tools to like stitch one together. So,
Nah.
No.
so, you guys settle in for bed, ready for whatever tomorrow may bring. Paul,
Yes.
this section's gonna concentrate on you for a while. You ready?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's time for some plot. Paul.
Alright, here comes the shit.
Paul, you awaken, and you're no longer on the breaker. You find yourself on a long bridge, surrounded on all sides by this dense fog. You can't see where the bridge goes, and you can't see what's behind you. And as far as you can tell, you're completely alone.
Alright, well.
Wasn't expecting this when he woke up this morning.
Yeah, but a bit worse, you know. I guess I'm gonna start. I guess I'll start walking. You know, I guess slowly, but cautiously forward.
Okay. You start to slowly edge forward. This bridge is this like wooden structure held up not by rope like most wooden bridges, but by stone pillars. And but it doesn't yield to your feet, so you just kind of walk cautiously but safely across. And after about 5 minutes of that, you see a shape in the fog. Is not moving towards you. It's just kind of perched on the edge of the left edge of the bridge. All you can see right now through the fog is it's sort of a feline-esque body shape.
Interesting.
I guess I'll. It's the one thing you should never do. I'll scream out, "Is anybody there?
Is anybody home?"
Somebody. Fraggle, fraggle.
Somebody help me! Raggle, fraggle. Okay, you as you call, the shape doesn't seem to react, but the head does kind of turn towards you slowly, and you hear this voice ring out. It kind of makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, because the way the voice kind of speaks and the kind of effect it has, a picture a voice that's kind of accompanied by the sound of a sword unsheathing. Like, so every like syllable or so is just and as the head turns to you and you can't make out any sound, you hear that voice speak out, "Please sit."
Wow, that's pretty convenient, because that's what I was thinking about doing anyways. Alright, I just sit down.
Okay. Do you want to sit down where you are, or like go approach it?
I mean, he didn't say move forward, he said sit, so I'm gonna sit down where I am.
Okay. As you sit, you feel like a kind of brief like rush of wind, and you kind of jump slightly because you had kind of sat down in the cross legs position, but your legs immediately give as you're now sitting on the edge of the bridge next to the creature.
Well, how's your day?
So you turn to look at the creature and say that. The creature is pretty wild looking. It does indeed look like a feline creature of some kind, but it has the like build of a bovine. Like it's like sides and shoulders are incredibly tough looking and broad. Like picture like a really buff tiger. And its head is this like just maze of eyes, patterns of 3, except for one in the exact center of a very human-looking face otherwise, with horns running down the length of its flanks. This creature kind of stares at you before nodding and looking into the distant fog and saying, "We are not well."
Oh. And what is the matter with you?
The fog in front of you parts slightly, and you can see that same kind of view you had of distant Levant, coated in this unending hurricane. And the creature speaks up again. "The creatures are afraid that the rain will never end."
Hmm. Is there any way to stop the rain?
The creature nods very slowly. "Getting past the guardians and securing the wind breastplate should stop the winds that make the rain."
I feel like they would have been a bit more like vague about it.
I don't know.
Like, I was kind of expecting
Well,
to
them
say,
being vague does not benefit them, so
Yeah, to be fair, we don't
Cash.
know what their motivation is, so.
Yeah. And
yeah, like it just, you know how these characters are. They start talking like that, and they don't just straight up say, "The wind breastplate." They say like, "The
the
mail
answer.
of the wind."
Yeah, the answer just a riddle or something like that. I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess I'd be like, well, so if I grab, if the breastplate was to be attained, would you be well?
The creature nods, and you hadn't noticed it initially because you were kind of taking in its very wild appearance. You notice the creature. You don't know what a creature like this is supposed to look like, but you notice that it's looking very harrow. Like its fur is kind of messy, and its eyes have a very like distant, kind of sickly look to them, and the horns on its flanks look kind of discolored. Um, and it nods, uh, and there's a pause before it speaks up again. "You are a man of medicine, yes?"
I am indeed.
The creature looks at you and says, "Do you know who I am?"
I am sad to say I do not.
The creature nods slowly and continues observing the distant Levant. "I am a Baise, a guardian spirit of medicine and health. The cold of the rain makes my creatures sick. The rain drives away the food, and so they starve. And you come, bringing with you." And you see kind of in the distant fog images of your party and the various crew members kind of not like doing anything, just kind of like floating aimlessly in and out of the fog.
Yeah.
You notice that they're all kind of accompanied by various images, but like they seem just kind of associated with them. Like it's not really anything you recognize.
Mm.
Uh, and eventually the Baise speaks and says, "I would ask you, as a patron of my domain, ensure that you and your friends and your crew do not harm my creatures. They are afraid, and when things are afraid, they are dangerous, but that does not mean they deserve to die for it."
I do understand you. I do understand you, and I will do everything in my power to make sure they are not not killed. Though I will also admit I have people I must protect. So I will try to protect all.
The creature surprisingly nods, completely understandingly, says, "That would be the best outcome of this. And the creature kind of looks in the distance again before saying, I myself live among the rain and windfall. If you wish to find me in the waking world, find the parasite forest, and I will be there.
That would be nice.
The creature stands at a fairly intimidating height, especially given that they've been sitting kind of crouched this whole time, and kind of like almost does like a kind of knighting motion with the horn, like kind of like when a cat rubs against you, but it like specifically moves so that like your head will go between the various horns, like almost as if it's knighting you, and it starts to walk to the other side of the bridge, and it's kind of slowly starts to disappear into the fog, and says, keep my creatures alive, and I will ensure that they keep you alive.
Mm.
And if you save my home and spare my creatures, you will be rewarded.
Award is not needed. Only the safeties of others.
The creature kind of stops and looks at you before nodding and saying, be well, Paul, you and your friends.
And you too.
And the Baize disappears into the fog. And you're just kind of left sitting there for a while. Do you want to do anything?
I mean, I guess I can look around.
Make a perception check.
I'm guessing like around. Perception. My modifier. Perception. Modifier 19.
You just kind of stop and look around, and once the Baize leaves, the fog starts to kind of close back in, so you can't see the distant Levant anymore. But looking around, you can see the images of your friends and the crew a lot clearer. Looking immediately around you, you see an image of Captain Red aboard what looks to be a flaming ship, fighting sword to sword with a person cloaked in shadow that you can't see clearly. Above you, you see an image of Flower and Fall sheltering from a heavy rainfall, with a sort of goblinoid-looking creature dressed in very humble tatters and rags, just kind of shivering and huddled for warmth in the rain. You see an image of the first mate, Sasha, trekking through a blizzard with a skeletal, dead or dying crew just trudging, like bleeding from wounds behind him. And you see other images like these before all three of you shoot awake as a crack of thunder wakes all of you up violently.
Ah, shit.
The ship around you is way like swaying and creaking violently, and you hear this of just a torrent of rainfall around you. You can already see leaks coming through like holes in the deck, not like holes, but just like little bits. And there's like flashes that like blind you with lightning before another. And you can hear the crew like shouting and screaming up top, like trying to keep the ship on course.
Red just jumps up. It's like, all right, time to go short and sail and get the ropes ready. Just goes running up deck.
All right, rest of you.
I'm gonna do whatever I can to make sure this ship gets where it needs to be.
Okay. Flower and Fall.
And go help the crew.
Oh, you're just gonna stay here, or are you saying
No,
like go
it's-
help the crews and that's what you're?
No, that's what I'm gonna do.
Okay, so Captain Red, you run forward and kick the doors open. Paul and Flower and Fall not far behind you. Flower and Fall, make me a Constitution save.
Ooh. Gotta make two then. Let's say sure.
It is going to be for both of you, but
Yeah.
you can use the same modifier.
Yeah.
So just tell me what.
Joke's on you, I get a +4.
I mean, yeah, that's good. I don't want you to fail. I just
You
put an
know,
obstacle in the way.
I don't want you to die, but you know.
That's a 15.
All right, so did you get roll the second one already?
Oh shit. I completely
Yeah,
forgot.
yeah, because it's for both of you.
That's a 20. And that
Alright.
20.
Flower, as Captain Red pushes the door open, this like heavy wind, like Captain Red, your hat goes flying into the gun deck below you. Paul, you have to like brace yourself to not like get pushed but down the stairs. And Flower and Fall, you almost just go flying straight into the wall, but manage to like flap your little wings desperately to stay put before the wind kind of lets up just enough for you guys to move.
Oof.
You look in front of you, and it's hard to do that. It is heavy rain. You can barely see a foot in front of your face. Until you guys get out of this rain, your visibility ranges are cut in half. You can barely hear over the like rushing of wind and the crew shouting and like wind pushing violently against the canvas. The ship is like almost like it's like friggin' sobbing violently as it's being just abused by this weather. Like you can see nearby the person in the plague doctor uniform is like trying desperately to light their torch up but just can't get a spark going in this weather. You look around you and it is chaos as the crew is trying to keep the ship from like just turning over, let alone making it to dock in this weather.
So who needs our immediate help?
I think
Make a
Captain
perception
Red's
check.
just gonna draw from all of his experience from sailing and just start yelling everything he knows what to do in if you
That's
ever
an
have
8.
to sail in a storm.
Okay. It's hard to see through the rain. You can't really you can just barely occasionally glimpse a member of the crew through the like rain and mist before like you lose sight of them as they rush to do something else. And Captain Red, you start like running around deck barking orders, and the crew is usually like already doing what you recommended. It seems like Sasha passed on your advice. Or
And I
like
guess he's also gonna be helping doing it while he's doing that.
Of course. And but you notice as you're doing that oftentimes you have to repeat yourself because they can't hear you over the noise. Any perception check that relies on listening, you will have disadvantage on.
Yeah.
Damn.
Lots of rain and thunder.
Speaking of which, another blinding flash of lightning, and Flower and Fall, you hear a "Yeah!" as Mary falls to the deck, but luckily he hadn't fallen from like a great height, so he just kind of rolls around on the soaking deck before picking himself back up and rushing to help help the person in the plague doctor uniform like pull in a loose rope.
Let's mention like they're probably like constantly fighting with the sail to stop it from blowing away.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem.
So I guess like Red's just like grabbing a rope too and just like does the whole thing of like planting his foot on the mast to hold it in place.
Yeah. Go ahead and make me a dexterity check.
Okay, let me. Can you do it?
Sure.
Because I can't get up right now. Turn everything.
The rest of you can do stuff while I'm making this roll.
Yeah.
You manage to get a good grip and keep that particular bit of canvas locked in while the rest of the crew scrambles.
I'll try to help them pull ropes.
Okay, make me a dexterity check. While they're doing that, Paul, what are you going to do?
I'm gonna help where I can. You know, where okay, well, I guess go walk until someone needs me.
All
That's
right.
a 20 even.
Okay. Flower and Fall, you managed to lock in one rope each and pull it in to just tie it to a solid-looking piece of board to keep that bit of canvas locked in. And Paul, Sasha grabs you by the shoulder. I always do that for some reason. Grabs you by the shoulder and spins you around, and he has to kind of yell a bit so you can hear him over the rain, and says, "Get to the crow's nest! We can't hear what the lookout's trying to tell us!"
All
So he's
right.
got to climb the mast.
Yeah.
Paul, make me an athletics check, or acrobatics if you're more confident in that.
Yeah, whenever. Oh yeah, well he's still trying to secure a rope, so.
I mean, either way, let's do this. Okay. 16.
Okay. Did you use acrobatics or athletics, just for flavor?
They're both the same, to be honest. So.
So preference, just for, again, flavor text.
Athletics.
Sure. So Captain Red, as you're like just fighting against the mast to keep the rope in place, and Flowerfall, you're just tying some knots. Paul just kind of walks past you, all cool like. He puts his shield and his weapons on his back so that he can have his hands completely free. Rubs his hands together before grabbing a nearby rope and just starting to monkey his way up. Paul, a bit of the mast almost like rushes into your face, and like knocks you clean off to your death. But Flowerfall and Captain Red all grab the rope and pull it violently to keep the mast in place so that you can climb past it. And eventually you get to the lookout, Mr. Smith, who does not appear to have noticed you. Again, rain and loud sounds, but you can hear him through the rain trying desperately to shout something down to the crew below him.
I guess, I'm gonna get his attention and be like, I
Just
can
like,
send a
be
message.
Yeah.
He looks at you like spooked for a second because he didn't think anyone would sneak up on him, before he grabs you by the collar to make absolutely sure that you hear him, because he's probably been trying to get this message out for a while, and says, "Sharks on the horizon!"
Oh.
There's one on the horizon.
Sharks.
I think
Whenever
sharks
he sees
are
your,
the least of our concern. Right now.
whenever he knows you kind of dismissive, he kind of shakes his head and friggin' like baps you on the head and says, "Big ones."
Well, I guess I'm gonna rush back down and tell
I
whoever's...
mean, I think unless it's like a megalodon, it's not a.
We'll see.
So Paul, make me another check of your preference to get back down.
Oh shit.
We'll do, I guess, athletics. I think that makes sense more.
Mm-hmm.
6.
Oof.
Yeah.
Just gotta grab some dice.
That's what we want to hear.
that's always good to hear. Like you make a check and the goes like, "Hang on, I just gotta grab some dice real quick."
No, what you don't want to hear is the end goes, "Oof."
Oof.
Let me grab some dice.
Yes. Oh, that sucks for you.
It's like, I need no, what you don't want to hear is out there bad rules. Man, I need more dice.
Just shit. Ah, damn. Hang on. Sorry, I was just double checking the rules to make sure I was doing this properly.
Sorry.
Phone wasn't loading, so I gotta do it here.
Yeah.
Okay. So you make it. But that sail, that red Flower and Fall were fighting against, finally yanks itself out from their grip, and smacks into you, sending you falling, and you take 15 points of falling damage.
All right.
Wow.
I'm passed out.
Paul lands square on his back and just goes blacks out entirely.
And Red just yelling through the rain, "Ah, shit! Man down!"
Man, that message is never gonna get through.
Dr. Alvablast rushes over and immediately starts getting some medical work. Where's my D20 bag?
I don't need to make saving throws and all that.
Well, if he can get you up.
This is the great thing about having a medic, huh?
Well, yeah, so
All
that's
right.
what I was. I just can't heal myself right now, at least.
Um, Paul, you are stabilized. The medic feels along your back and yells up to Captain Red, Flower and Fall, and just says, "He's still breathing."
Hmm.
You might need to get him off the deck. We don't want to trip on him.
He nods and hoists Paul over his shoulder before, running as best as he can with the wet floor and the person over his back to get to the gun deck. Sorry, Austin.
It happened.
I guess
and all
Regis also looks to well, I guess he's technically the first mate and says,
Mm.
"We're a man short now."
He growls and grips the wheel firmly and just says, "So help me God, we'll make it to shore." And you notice he suddenly gets like a look of horror on his face.
Oh, I guess they found the big shark.
I know. Flowerfall and Red, you look and just kind of squint through the rain and mist at what he's looking at, and there's like a brief part in the fog where you can see this just long stretch of ocean that is currently a minefield of maelstroms and whirlpools.
Oh.
By Poseidon bear.
Flower and Fall, anything? And you guys hear the lookout like yelling something from the top, from the crow's nest, before the captain finally like tosses the wheel over to Everett, who spins it as best he can with his tiny body before he runs up to the deck and basically just smacks it. And in this really surprisingly intimidating moment, there's like a very, like whenever it's raining really hard outside, and there's that split second where it stops before resuming.
Mm-hmm.
He slams his fist into the mast, and that happens, although there's like a little downpour before he shouts up, "What?" And the lookout calls down, "Megalodon!" before the ship rumbles violently.
Oh shit! That's how I lost my fourth ship.
The ship pitches and yawns violently and dips really terrifyingly, and you guys look to see that you have steered straight into a maelstrom.
Well, no.
That's like a whirlpool, right?
Yeah, very big whirlpool that comes from conflicting sources of wind.
Oh my.
So, do we have time to get in a battle? What's up, Qua?
I said no.
Okay, no, I figured that's why I wanted to bring it up. So, you guys are literally staring a giant whirlpool in the face that threatens to eat your ship if the gigantic shark doesn't do it first.
Yeah.
Paul, you are down for the count with hopefully not a broken spine. You know what's ironic too, because I actually kind of scaled back the damage a bit because I was like, well, I don't want to just knock him out right here.
Well, I had a bad roll on my thing, and I don't have a lot of constitution.
Okay. That makes sense. Sorry, man.
I have 14 HP. I was 1 HP off.
Aw, damn it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it happens.
I know it's like D&D. I just feel bad. This is going to be interesting. We will pick this up next week. See you guys then.
Woo.